One of the responses to our question about the greatest moral challenge relates to something that's very central to people that would identify as Bible-believing Christians, or people you might say are evangelicals in the theological sense of the word, about people who believe the Bible, its complete authority. And the challenge is this: it's how do they actually read the Bible? In other words, how should they read the Bible, and are they doing it with integrity? That's not exactly how the question was stated, but that's what it's asking. It's talking about the fact that what was told to us about the fact that people aren't being honest about really the context or the differing contexts that are in the Bible. And sometimes you read something in if you read one text in its context, you'll interpret it a particular way. But if you pay no attention to the context, you may read it and misread it. And I think here's what the problem is. The great thing about the evangelical movement in terms of the commitment to the Bible is the intention to completely trust the Bible. God said it, I believe it, that settles it, that kind of thing. That's a great commitment. The problem is sometimes when people are learning to read the Bible and they're thinking about the Bible that way, they read the Bible as if all the statements are basically the same types of statements, when there are actually multiple genres in the Bible. If you read the book of Romans, that's a letter written to the church at Rome. If you read the Gospels, those are narratives. If you read the Psalms, those are poetic literature. If you read Proverbs, that's wisdom literature. We can't interpret all of those the same way. Simple case in point. When Proverbs tells us, train up a child in the way that they should go, or according to their way, and they will not depart from it. For some people, the way that they interpret that text when they read the Bible as a text that they trust, they believe that that text in Proverbs is making a promise. And because it's making a promise, they expect that if they figure out the right formula for raising their children, then what will happen? Their children will turn out the right way. But it's misunderstanding the way that statements in Proverbs work. Basically, a lot of the Proverbs are giving us statements that would say, generally speaking, or in most cases, if you raise up a child according to their way, and to the way that they should go, there's a lot of debate about what that means, but let's say that it means according to the kind of person that they are, in terms of their gifts, talents, abilities, disposition. If you raise them up properly, in accordance with who they are, in terms of gifts, talents, abilities, personality, then they will go down the right path. They won't go off the rails, so to speak. And so that text is saying that most of the time that will happen. It's not saying all the time that will happen. And so that's one example of that. Certainly another classic example would be, how do you read the book of Revelation? The book of Revelation is written 7 churches at the beginning, but a lot of times the ways that people interpret the book of Revelation is simply a book that is telling us about what's going to happen in the future before Jesus comes back. And people disregard the fact that it's clearly written to people at a particular time and place to encourage them in the context of the Roman Empire. And yes, it speaks about the future, but was it telling the people in the first century, hey, centuries from now, there's going to be a place in the United States and it's going to be in a certain kind of context with certain military conflicts, etc. And this is when God's going to do certain things that get close to bringing the world to an end. Well, I'm not saying that Revelation doesn't speak at all to our contemporary context, but a lot of times people aren't asking about what it meant to the people that first read it. And so the point is that it's a moral challenge and a moral, really, compromise if people read the Bible and they actually wind up disregarding what they're reading or what kind of text that they're reading. The commitment is good. The commitment is admirable to want to trust the Word of God, but the understanding of the Word of God becomes complicated, let's say, when people are not asking, How do I understand this in terms of the kind of literature that it is, in terms of the audience to whom it was originally written, and how that message that's written to that original audience does also speak to us, even though we're not the first audience for whom those texts were written. So that is an important moral challenge, and perhaps particularly for this reason. If people say, I'm a Bible-believing Christian, I trust the Bible, I live my life in accordance with it, but then they're not doing their homework, so to speak, with the Bible, then what problems do we wind up having? Well, people make very strong statements about what they think the Bible actually says, but they're getting it wrong because they're not really trying to get at what it actually says, because they're not doing the work about understanding it in its context. So it's a great moral challenge, but it's also a great opportunity to actually know our Bibles better, and then knowing them better, to respond to them with ethical wisdom.